The snow had come early, soft as ash and quiet as breath. It gathered in hollows along the godswood, smudging the roots of the heart tree until the old face looked as if it wept white tears. Jon watched the flakes drift and melt in the steam that coiled from the nearby springs. Winterfell's breath, the old men used to call it, and as a boy he'd imagined the castle as a slumbering creature, its hot blood rising through stone arteries to smoke in the cold. Now he did not have to imagine it. The ground itself felt warm through the crust of snow beneath his boots, a subtle pulse thumping once for every gust of wind. He laid a hand against the weirwood's smooth bark. The tree was damp, and its carved mouth crooked down as if listening. Jon closed his eyes and let the wood's coolness leach the noise from his skull. The quarrels of the day, the scraped raw ache of command, the gnawing friction with Sansa over stores and oaths, and the true weight of a crown he had never sought. All of it slipped as the faintest thrum rose through his palm, a hummingbird thing, distant and old and too stubborn to die. He had felt it before in this place, though never so clearly. When the sound sharpened like a plucked bowstring, Ghost lifted his head and gave a low, uneasy whine. "I know," Jon murmured. "I hear it too." He opened his eyes. The godswood was still. The weirwood's scarlet leaves edged the world like torn silk. Beyond, the broken towers and patched walls stood stoic under their crust of rime, and beyond that lay all the north, a pale, breathless country sunk in the first true hush of winter. Some storms howl. This one had arrived like a stranger in the night, shutters latched, boot prints erased by morning. He wasn't alone. He could feel the gaze before he heard the step. Sansa stood near the fringe of the boughs, hands hidden in the fur of her sleeves, the snow collecting along her lashes like powdered glass. She had learned to walk without a sound, like someone who had lived too long among dogs that bite. "Your counsel waits," she said. "They can wait," Jon said, then added, "A little. They will say the king in the north consults a tree more than his lords. Maybe trees make the better counsel." She did not smile. The wind teased a strand of auburn hair loose from her hood, and he saw in the line of her mouth all the iron it took to hold this patchwork of banners and old hatreds together. She had been forged in courts and cages, where teeth are hidden in ribbons. He was iron of a rougher cast, blood and snow and the hard ground beneath a man's knees. Between them stretched a gulf they bridged daily, sometimes with rope, sometimes with words their father might not have approved of. Love was in it, or something that kept them from letting go. "What do you hear?" Sansa asked, and there was no mockery in it. "A song in the stone." Jon hesitated, a man knowing he was about to sound mad. "There's a sound under the springs, old as Winterfell. I've felt it for days, since the first snow." She drew nearer, not to him, but to the heart tree, placing her hand where his had been. A moment passed, another. Her breath came white between parted lips. "I hear nothing." "You never climbed these trees as a girl," he said, half teasing. He remembered Arya higher than anyone, rag-scraped knees and a grin split wide with bark burns. "I climbed other walls." She lowered her hand. "If you hear something, then say it is the pipes, or Roose Bolton's old drains. Let us not go seeking more ghosts beneath our feet than the crypts already hold." Ghost had risen now, red eyes narrowed on a patch of earth where the snow had crusted thin. He padded toward it, his furs white dissolving into the pale world so seamlessly that Jon lost him for a moment, then caught the ghost again by the ripple of his movement. The direwolf sniffed, pawed once, paused, and then looked back, the silent question set hard between his ears. Jon crossed the sodden snow and crouched. Heat licked his face like a forge's exhalation. The spot ghost had chosen steamed faintly through the powder. Jon brushed the snow aside with his glove and found stone beneath, warm and sweating. It was carved. He froze, then brushed harder, the cold wetness soaking into his fingertips as lines emerged. A pair of twisting shapes like ropes or roots. No, not roots. The curves coiled upon themselves and crossed with purpose. Scales. Sansa knelt opposite him. The red in her hair seemed deeper against the white. "What is it?" "Valyrian," he said, though he did not know why he said it. The symbols were not letters, but they spoke to him with the clarity of firelight. He scraped away more snow. Underneath lay a round of black stone, a disc set flush with the earth, old enough that the frost had pulled the edges into the ground's lip. The carvings chased one another around its circumference. Serpents with wings, jaws split, spines like spears, all of them spiraling toward the disc center where something had been etched and then gouged away by a chisel or a knife long ago. Sansa's thumb passed over one scaled figure. It was barely more than a shadow in the stone. "A dragon," she murmured. He met her eyes. "No," she said quickly, a laugh in it that did not quite take. "No. Winterfell is wolves and weirwoods and old gods. Dragons are for songs and Southron histories." The hum deepened. Jon felt it in his teeth now, a gritty chattering as if the earth ground its old molars together. The disc was warm enough that he hissed and snatched his fingers back. The godswood's branches creaked. The face in the weirwood seemed to lean. "Get the maester," he said. "And Lyra." Lyra, the builder. She was sealing the southern posterns. "We'll need her eyes for stones like this, and have the council wait in the great hall. I'll be there when I can." Sansa stood without argument. That alone made Jon's unease bloom into something colder. She left the godswood with a flurry of scarlet leaves dancing in her wake and disappeared into the plume of her own breath. Ghost whined again, low. Jon stroked the wolf's muzzle, then leaned over the disc, listening. The hum thrummed at his bones, wrapped his joints with singing wire. It was not only sound, it was memory baited with music. He thought of a black lake shivering in lamplight. He thought of an old woman's tale muttered out between pearls of yarn, of a gate under the hill that no man could find but children would fall toward, of a king who never left his chair because the chair belonged to the earth and the earth had a tongue. He thought of his father telling him when he had been small and suspicious of the crypts that steel never rusted down there, that the old king sat clean and patient as if waiting for a dinner bell. He also thought of dragonfire. "Not here," he said to the air as if it belonged to someone who could argue. "Not this world, not this place." The stone warmed further, and the carvings seemed to flex. That was the trick of heat and old patterns, he knew. Yet it felt like the sight of something breathing just beyond a thin wall. Jon closed his eyes, and in the dark behind them, for a heartbeat only, he saw a coil of black and dull red, immense and still, wreathed through a cavern where water fell in slow ropes and the sound of it had become as much a silence as a noise. One great lid peeled back, revealing an eye like a slice of garnet gone old with smoke. The pupil collapsed to a needle at the center of that wine-black gold. It was not the look of an enemy, nor of a friend. It was the look of a storm tasting a leaf. Jon fell backward, palms skidding on the wet snow. Ghost darted to him, tongue warm and rank against his cheek. Jon sat breathing hard at the base of the heart tree. The carved face gazed down on him with that eternal, aggravating calm. Somewhere a bell rang 3 times, the notes scattering jackdaws from the battlements in a ragged dark flower. The council waited. Soon this mystery would have hungry mouths and sharpened questions. For this moment, he took one more breath as a man alone with his fear. It smelled, that fear, he realized, not of sour sweat but of old scales after rain. By the time Lyra came with Maester Gendry and 3 of her apprentices, Sansa had already dispatched runners to keep the soldiers away from the Godswood and sent Arya to the kitchens, of all places, with some instruction Jon didn't catch. The men arrived with shovels and pry bars, and when Lyra lifted the wrappings from her hands, her fingers were missing the tips of 2. The woman had lost them to frostbite years ago near the last river, but her palms were deft with the stone as a harpist's might be with strings. She knelt without preamble and touched the disc with her bare skin. She flinched, eyes flashing. "That's not Winterfell's stone," she said. "What is it?" Jon asked. "Something that remembers fire." Maester Gendry peered down, pupils wavering in his milk-blue eyes, the breath whistling through his teeth as if even that required a scholar's precision. "Black glass," he said, though the word wasn't quite right. "Obsidian, men call it. Dragon glass, polished smooth and made to suffer carvings. Very old. Lyra had her apprentices brushing snow from the edge of the disc and packing the exposed parts with cold, wet rags. To keep the stone from cracking, she explained, heat on frost could split even the strongest rock. They cleared it in a circle no wider than a cartwheel, revealing the carven serpents marching by twos toward the center of the disc. Their wings were etched with a stylus so fine the frost had preserved the scrapes like ice writing another language on top of the old. "Can you lift it?" Jon said. "Not today," Lyra answered bluntly. "Not without breaking it, and it wants not to be broken. We would need a cradle and chains, and if it is joined to anything beneath, lifting may pull the whole god's wood up by its roots. But there is a seam here." She pressed her blunt fingers into a thin crack nearly invisible to Jon's eyes. "It turns. It wants to turn." Gendry shook his head. The maester's gray hair stuck out from under his cap in untrustworthy feathers. "Beware old wants. Turning stones under ancient trees is the beginning of nearly every bad story I could tell." "Tell one," Arya said. She had arrived silently, a knife in one hand, a heel of bread in the other, steam rising from the crust into the raw air. She passed the bread to Lyra without looking. Ghost sniffed at her fingers and received a scratch beneath his jaw in return. "Make it short." Gendry eyed the girl. "No, the woman," Jon corrected himself, for Arya could pass the knife to death and be done with it and still have room in her day to wrestle a child or whistle a tune, then cleared his throat. "In the hills of Norvos there are wells carved into the bedrock with such careful mouths that when the wind blows from the north the wells hum sweetly. Children fall in, not by accident as their mothers insist. The sound asks for them. There are also pits beneath the ruins of Valyria that were not mines and not sewers, lined with this same glass, and those who tossed a torch down said the torch went out as if eaten." "Thank you," Sansa cut in, all politeness filed to a thin blade. "We are not in Norvos, and we are no longer at the Doom. We are in Winterfell, and Winterfell has handled old, dangerous things before. Lyra, can it be done without bringing the walls down around us?" Lyra ran her hand slowly around the seam. Her fingers were good at speaking to stone, and stone, stubborn and proud, spoke back to her after a fashion. "Slow and careful," she said. "We build a collar to take the weight as we turn. We keep water on the edge so the heat lies quiet. We do not force. It is not stuck. It is thinking." "Stone's thinking," Arya said, rolling her eyes. "Have you been talking to Bran?" Jon gave her a look. The name hovered in the air like a moth that had burned itself on a candle. Bran had not come back from the south with them. Bran had gone beyond the wall in bodies and thought and birds. What returned wore his face, wore some of his voice. But winter stamped the world flat, and some things were easier left to the far fields of the brain. To think too long on Bran was to feel fingers combing the inside of your skull. "Prepare your collar," Jon said. "We do this before the next storm. The ground will only harden by then." They set to work. Lyra took one apprentice to the smithy to shape the curve of the collar, and the other two fetched ropes and wedges. Men came and went, bringing sawhorses and lanterns and more rags. The Godswood, usually a quiet place of private prayer and boyish mischief, became a low hive of purposeful motion. All of it looped around the disc like ribbon around a spool. The weirwood watched. Sansa sent for a cask of oil. Jon forbade it. She frowned at him. "If it cracks, we will need." "It will not be oil that calms it," he said, and his certainty surprised him. "Water." Arya tilted her head. "You speak of it as if it has a temper." "It does," Jon said, thinking of the eye. When night came, the Godswood glowed like a ship in fog, lantern light making islands in the white. Sentries passed in pairs outside the low fence. The castle beyond was all blind windows and occasional lamps, the shadows of men crossing them like fish moving behind waxed paper. Somewhere a hound barked once and then, remembering the quiet, stopped. They began the turn at moonrise. The collar Lyra had built was a semicirclet of hammered iron studded with bolted braces. It hugged the disc's edge with only the space for rags between iron and black glass. She fixed handspikes into sockets she had drilled with a gem-tipped bit that cost more than some men's wives, and positioned her apprentices opposite each other. Jon took a spike as well without asking, and so did Sansa, to Lyra's glance of surprise and Arya's pleased smirk. Gendry stood with a ledger and a string tied around his wrist, as if numbers could tie a stone to sense. "At your breath," Lyra said to Jon, because some old songs insisted the first push belonged to the lord of the place. Jon drew in the cold until his lungs scalded and nodded. They pushed. The stone came grudgingly, then all at once by a finger width. The hum rose around them, all in the marrow, an unplayed horn. Steam puffed in little tantrums where the rim lifted and drew the wet rags tighter. Water dripped into the seam and hissed as if annoyed at being dismissed from its quiet bed. They stopped. Lyra adjusted a wedge. They pushed again. At a quarter turn, the hum became a chord. The carvings rolled like fish beneath a stream's surface. At a half turn, the disc's center aligned with a notch in the bedrock, and something under the stone side. Ere long trapped, slipping out as a man might slip from a crowded hall into an alley to breathe alone. It smelled like iron and orchids. No, not orchids. Hot stone. Old scales. A spice Jon could not name that made his molars ache as if he had bit down on tin. The disc slid free and struck the stops built to keep it from rolling. The stilled hum retreated like a wave pulling back from sand. Below lay a black throat, a shaft wider than a well and lined with the same dark glass. Steps had been cut into the smooth as if a carver had poured the stone and then taken a knife to it before it cooled, shaping an untrustworthy spiral that vanished into breath and shadow. Arya leaned over the mouth, her braids slipping toward that fall as if curious. "A pit," she said cheerfully. "Shall we throw Gendry down and listen for the scream?" "Send a lantern," Sansa said, ignoring her. They lowered 3, each tied to a separate rope. The lanterns drifted down, their light clinging to the walls in buttery strokes, then vanished like minnows darting into weeds. The ropes paid out longer. The lantern's light returned as faint gold smudges on the shaft wall far below. They swayed. Jon imagined breath stirring them. No, wind did not move like that, slow and pulsing. "The steps look sound," Lyra said, too honestly, "but the ice along the edge will die with the lantern warmth, and the stone will sweat. The first man down must keep his pride in his teeth." "I'll go," Jon said. Arya was already unlooping her rope from the lantern's iron ring. "We both go." Sansa's hand closed on Arya's arm. "You will go nowhere until men-at-arms have driven pitons into every third step and a second rope has been set in." Arya smiled with all her little knives showing. "Yes, my lady. We're all so very sensible now." Jon touched Sansa's wrist, a quick press of thanks. He knew why she argued. Jon could give orders, carry a sword, take a wound. Sansa dealt with a war that had no blades, only mouths. You did not frighten a dragon by killing it. You frightened it by telling a story in the right place at the right time. If he fell down a hole, the story would eat them before winter did. The pitons were set. Wedges groaned into stone. A second line was rigged. Lyra tested each iron bite with the same tenderness she'd apply to a babe's swaddling pinned to a bed cord. When she was satisfied, she nodded and stood aside. Arya had already tied her rope to her belt, fingers quick and indifferent. Jon did the same, ghost-paced, bristling at the shaft, translating old truths with his teeth. Dark bad, hot bad, down bad, smell wrong. "Stay," Jon told him. Ghost stayed exactly the way a river stays when you tell it to wait. They descended. The steps were narrower than a boot, a miser's charity. Jon took them sideways, one hand on the wall, one on the rope, the lantern slung to his belt, banging his hip with every cautious stride. The dark pressed on him like a father's hand telling a child it was time to sleep. His breath made little clouds that whipped away into the shaft. Arya moved, lightly ahead of him, her lantern held out as if it were an apple she meant to give an enemy. She did not look back. She always trusted that he would follow. The hum returned. No, not a hum. Breathing. Slow. Old. The steps bled sweat. A trickle ran past Jon's knuckles and the water was warm. He tasted it without thinking. Salt, not sea salt, the taste of stone. Left, Arya said quietly, and he saw the cut in the wall where the steps expanded into a lip that led to a low arch. Beyond lay a gallery carved entirely from the same black glass, as if a river of it had frozen mid-flow and men then taught it obedience with patience and knives. The gallery opened into a chamber. Jon had seen Dragonstone once. He had knelt on black sand while a wind that remembered fire bit his face. This chamber was not that. It was smoother, older, less carved than shaped by consent. The walls wept in slow beads. The floor rose and fell in lumps where bubbled stone had broken and then slumped before it cooled. And through it all lay coils. He did not see the creature at first. It was too enormous. The mind refused it, as a man refuses a wave until it touches his knees. Then, in the corner where lantern light went reluctantly, he saw a curve like a hill's flank. A nostril, a closed slit, the size of a man's hand. A web of warmth peeled from it. The lantern flame guttered. Arya's breath hitched. He had heard it only twice in his life. Once when she was a girl and had thought she'd lost Needle for good. Once in the long night when she had looked up and seen the blue eyes of a thing that had worn a boy's face. This was different. Less fear than the sudden arrival of an old story she had told herself for years to keep the cruel parts of the world at bay. Now climbing over the wall into her bed. "Gods!" Arya whispered. The eye opened, and there was the garnet needle Jon had seen when his eyes were shut. No, not garnet. A deeper stone. Some black wine with gold drowned in it. The pupil tightened. The head lifted an inch the size of a wagon. The skin, or scale upon scale, rubbed the stone floor and sang very softly. The jaw unhinged a fraction. Breath poured over them, warm and not at all foul, but mineral and spiced with something like pepper crushed under iron. The lantern flames knelt. Jon did not move. His heart lunged once. He put it on a rope and tied it to a stake. His hands were empty. He did not reach for his sword because his sword would not be a sword in this chamber. Only a thought men had sometimes about being tall. The dragon's eye moved from Arya to Jon and settled. In that gaze lay nothing human. Yet there was a sort of recognition, not affection, not hostility. Recognition the way a river recognizes a stone that has been in it a long time and has learned the river's voice. It spoke, not with words, not at first. The voice broke over him like the sound inside a seashell, distant and too near all at once. It was not a woman's voice or a man's or a beast's. It was stone remembering heat. It was a wheel turning under a great weight. It was a match struck in a cave and no air to feed it. When he understood at last, it was not because the voice had changed, but because he had. Old blood, it said. Old bone. The word old was the size of Winterfell. Jon lifted his chin. He did not know if he needed to speak aloud. His voice came dry and too small. "Who carved the way to you?" "I did," said the dragon, and Jon felt the shapes that were hands but not hands pushing at the stone when it was still soft. The mind of heat teaching the mind of earth a curve. Long ago, after the fire walked, the fire went away. I slept. "Why sleep here?" Arya asked, because she was Arya and questions were swords too. "Why under Winterfell?" "My mother found the warm place," came the answer, slow and patient as glaciers moving. "She died. I lived. There were no more. All the songs told me there would be more and more, but she died, and they died, and everything lost its names." The words were a string of pictures folded into sound. Jon swallowed. "Do you know the world above? The world outside the stone?" The dragon's eyelid drooped lazily, rose again. The stone hum trembled in his bones with a faint amusement. "I know when the snow comes. I know when the wolves breed. I know when men pour water down and when they sing. They sang once, long ago. They called me a word that meant light and not light. They brought me bones of great deer and a horn that had never been opened. They asked me to stay as if I had gone anywhere. I slept. The heat is deep under you. Your stones float on it. It is the blood of the world. You call it Winterfell's breath. Called me. Then why wake now?" Arya said. Her hand touched his sleeve, the barest brush. It would be like Arya to kill with that touch. Now it asked him to still an urge he hadn't yet named. The eye narrowed, the pupil thinned. It felt like a spear looking for a soft piece of belly in his words. "The cold above walks again," said the dragon, and it shaped the word cold as if it were iron filed to a wire. Not winter, not snow, the other cold. The one that licks at the edge of heat as a dog licks a bone, meaning to take the whole. Jon closed his eyes, then forced them open. He would not see this old creature through his old fear. He said, "The Night King is dead." The dragon did not have a laugh, but the sound it made now had laughter space inside it. An old cold is cut, another grows. This is the work of the world. Things with legs bump into it. I smelled the other cold in the smoke of a comet, in the teeth of wind under a door. It is far yet, but it is awake, and so am I. Jon's lantern trembled on his belt. Arya had become still as only she could be, all intention banked as if she were the stone and the dragon were the knife. She said, after a moment, "If we told you we needed you, if we told you there was war, not today but soon, would you come up?" Up, the dragon mused, and the word "are" awed around the chamber with the slow pleasure of a cat chasing its own tail. The weir roots reach, the glass remembers, the mouths of wolves know my name. The men you brought sing less than the men who brought me food. Your songs all smell like iron and wanting. But I know you. Jon felt the gaze again, the river seeing the stone. He asked, in the quiet he kept for the worst questions, "How?" The dragon's breath, that slow tide, washed them once more. "What is broken in you looks like me." He flinched before he could stop himself. The eye cooled. No insult. It was not cruelty. It was simply the way things that were true laid themselves down and waited for men to step on them. Jon heard the words again and again in the space behind his face. "What is broken in you looks like me." The beast did not mean a wound, or perhaps it did. He thought of ice in a face like his with no breath, of a blade that had bitten stone with a roar of spells and spit gleaming like made sunrise, of a girl in a god's dagger shadow, of fire in a city where bells would not ring. "What would you want?" Jon asked, and the words scratched on the way out. "If you came up." The dragon shut its eye. "Much, little, room to turn, room to breathe, no chain on the neck, no horn, no lies that hope could become eggs. I will not be mother. I will not be father. If the other cold comes, I will be hunger. That we can manage," Arya muttered. Jon laid a hand on the wall. The glass was warm enough to soak into his palm. It was like touching skin, but a skin that remembered storms. "We can keep the hall in meat," he said. "We can offer a cavern deeper than this if you want the turn of it. We can open the hot channels and let more breath come up." The dragon opened its eye. "You make promises as if time were a dog that will fetch your stick and come back." He stared at the pupil until the pupil began to look like the memory of itself. "I make promises as if the dead were listening. They are." The dragon, old as a failed empire's nursery rhyme, older than the last pride of the last proud lord who had bled under Winterfell's walls, considered. It moved with the slow terror of the sea deciding land would be better somewhere else. When it spoke again, the words were a touch different, the edge of them less polished. "Bring my name up. Not the men's name, not the weirwood's. The name my mother gave when she curled her tail over me and whispered in smoke I was the last chestnut in a burned forest. Bring it. Say it to the red tree. If the tree answers, I will follow it with my teeth." Jon's mouth had gone dry. "What name did she give you?" "Names die," came the patient response. "But some are sleeping. Wake it." He exhaled. He did not know how to wake a name. Then he thought of Bran, and for a heartbeat a thin, sap-slow thread ran from his skull into the weirwood's face above. He could almost taste the tannin in the weir's blood. "We'll come back," he said. He looked to Arya. With Bran's voice, Arya's face flickered once, as if a small fire had leapt and been pressed quickly flat by a careful hand. "You mean the ravens?" "I mean Bran," Jon said. "What's left? The rest of him is what we'll need now." The dragon's head sank back to the floor with a controlled surrender. It shut its eye. The breathing remained, the room's own tide. Jon and Arya stood a long while after, as if determined to outweight an old mountain. In time, they climbed. In the Godswood, the disc had been repacked with wet rags and covered with a tarp. Steam rose along its edges in lazy threads. Lyra had left 2 men to watch it, as if it were a sleeping drunk who might roll over and smother his own vomit. Sansa sat on a bench near the heart tree, her cloak folded over her knees, her hair a darkened copper in the lanterns. When she saw Jon and Arya, she rose without asking the question trapped behind her teeth. "A dragon," she said. It wasn't a guess. It was a fact that had finally found the right room. Jon nodded. "Alive? Aye. Hungry?" Arya asked, not bothering to hide her grin now. The mad joy of it made her look 10 years younger and 5 years older. "Not yet," Jon said. Then, because Sansa would need the whole truth to build the net that would hold this without snapping, he said, "It wants its old name. It wants the tree to speak it. It will come when the old words are awake." Sansa looked at the heart tree. The face's downturned mouth seemed more like a too prudent parent tonight than a god. "Bran," she said. She did not shout. She didn't say, "Our brother," or "the boy who went away." She said the name as lay healers say morphine. "He must be reached," Jon said. "We will need a raven that finds the eye under the leaves, not the rookery. He will not answer the bird. He will answer the roots." "Do you know what you are saying?" Gendry asked weakly. He had a sheaf of notes in his hand he had not once looked at during their absence. "Do you know what you are bringing into the north?" Sansa's gaze slid to him. She did not blink. "We are bringing the north into the world as it is." "Dragons don't care for banners," Lyra muttered from her chair with the low wedge of her shoulders. "Stone does. Wood does. Men do." Arya drew in a breath that wanted to be laughter and didn't fit. "We don't have a banner for dragons. We have a yard for them." "Not yet," Jon said, though he saw it, God help him. The inner ward's mud churned into some new order to take the weight of the beast's tread. The smithy's fires turned to shaping more than horseshoes and nails, the halls stinking of new meat, and above them all the weirwood's bloody leaves fluttering as a word older than Winterfell woke and shook down the snow. The men would kneel and tell stories of how their grandfathers had always said there was a dragon under the springs. They would insist bread had risen sweeter since the breath grew warmer in their ovens. Someone would write a song as red as cheap wine and sing it in. The buttered mare. Another winter would come. The council had not been dismissed. Jon found them in the great hall, their breath smoking in front of them and their voices newly careful as word of the thing spread as it always did. Through the eyes of servants who carried soup, through the ears of boys whose work took them past a Godswood where lanterns burned all night. He told them the truth and left the lies to men outside the hall. Banners rustled. One lord's fingers began the drumming that passed for thought in little men. A cousin of the Karstarks whispered, "At last," and then looked terrified that he had said it. A tall woman from the Rills, Lady Berena, who could split a sheep's liver with her thumbs and say if it had seen winter in its youth, nodded once and folded her hands into her furs. "My grandmother's grandmother used to say the springs steamed because a little god lived under the hill," she said. "It seems the god is large." "Fine, gods eat." Gendry's mouth moved. "My lords," he said, addressing everyone and no one. Dragons are alive," Arya said brightly from where she had slouched on the dais steps. Needlework abandoned in a loop that had never once had thread on it. "You'd have liked it, Lord Serwyn. It has your patience." Lord Serwyn looked grave, as if he would very much like not to have anything at all. Sansa let the talk bloom and wilt in cycles until it would take shape. Then she stood, and her voice wasn't loud, but it struck and the sound pulled straight down like a plumb line. "This thing lives under our feet. It is older than our oaths and will outlast our grudges. If we bury our heads, it will lick our necks. If we lift our faces, it will look back. We will feed it. We will not chain it. We will ask our brother to give it back its name. When the other cold comes, we will have teeth to meet it. In the meantime, Any man who teaches his son to throw oil on a beast because he thinks he can light it like a torch will find himself thrown outside the walls with a candle in his mouth. We are done with the age of men who think fire is just something to cook their dinner. Silence, and then the low thunder of agreement from those who had decided they would agree. Those who would not agree said nothing and looked thoughtful in the way of men who were not. The ravens were carved from the air in the black hours before dawn. It had snowed again, a dust that skirled along the tops of walls and settled thick in the crooks of elbows and the corners of mouths. Arya stood in the god's wood under a lantern tied to a branch and held out her wrist. The bird came like a stone from a sling, alighting with a peck of claws that ground straight to bone. She did not flinch. Jon bent close and whispered while the bird's head cocked, as if language had weight and he were filling the creature with just enough to fly level. "Go to the eye," he said. "Go to the roots and the nets and the boy who is a tree. Tell him his brother says there is a name in the wood that must wake." The raven blinked, then took the air in 3 savage pumping strokes that blew snow to glitter around them. It vanished in the dark like a thought you forgot to write down. They waited. Morning rose like a wound closed with frost. Runners came from every gate, hot-eyed with news about nothing. The baker had found a face in a loaf. A sow had littered 9 piglets and the 10th was born dead. A boy from Molestown swore the ground had bucked under his feet. There were no signs beyond the signs men made of anything. Jon slept in his cloak on the dais with ghost heavy as fate against his ankle. When he woke, Sansa was at a table with 3 women assigning spades to men for digging latrines farther from the main well. Arya had not truly slept. She had become very good at pretending to be a rope. Before noon, the bird returned. It did not alight. It did not need to. A shiver started in the godswood before the first feather had cut Winterfell's air. It was not sight. It was not sound. It was the feeling a man has when his old hound lies down in a different spot for the first time in 7 years. The heart tree shook itself, leaves clattering. The red face's mouth seemed to open a hair more, though that might have been the wind's finger under a leaf. Then the voice came, not the dragon's, not a man's, not the gods but the thing inside names. Jon felt it in his bones the way he had felt the dragon, and he understood that the understanding was a gift his brother had placed in his hand as carefully as a sharp blade. The word passed from the heart tree into the ground, and from the ground into the black glass and down along the stair like water eager for gravity. The word was smoke and bone and a little rough play you wouldn't think a mother could sanction. It was gentle and terrible. It was the first answer to a newborn's first cry. He spoke it aloud because that was part of the old bargains. The breath of men must dress the bones of gods. "Valsera," Jon said. The breath smoked. The steam from the springs tugged it apart. Arya's smile was sudden and vicious and very young. They did not walk down to fetch the dragon. That would have been like walking down to fetch a storm. They stood at the pit's rim and listened as the steps spoke under the weight. Jon had thought they would hear the scrape of scale on glass like tearing silk. What reached them was softer, the sound of the world turning on a hinge. Lyra's men tightened ropes and then remembered there were no ropes. Not that would matter. Gendry fumbled his papers and then held them close like a mother with a thick child she wanted to protect from his own kind heart. Sansa took off her gloves and tucked them into her belt, her fingers pale and steady. Arya stood with her feet planted as if a ship were under her and something tall would try to knock her flat. The head rose first, slow and controlled. The dragon did not rush the boundary between below and above. It eased itself into the mouth of the world with the self-possession of a river in flood, knowing that if it wanted your town it would have it without fuss. The eye saw them and did not change. It closed for a heartbeat as it breathed air that had run through ovens and halls and the sleeping mouths of men. When Valsera, Jon would not call the thing dragon, not now that it had a name, reached the surface, steam poured up around the black coils, wreathing the godswood in white. The lanterns gouged and dimmed. The heart tree shook again, less violently, leaves sprinkling their slow blood. The disc, tilted in its collar, hissed. Valsara's head rose to the tree's height and then higher, until it could look out over the wall of the godswood to the inner ward and gate towers beyond. and to the north beyond that, pale and flat and wide as a graveyard built for gods. The men of Winterfell fell back as if a wave had pushed them, and then they held. Some bent the knee because it was what you did to things that could crush you at a thought. Some stood because they had seen enough men kneel in their lives. One man laughed once in a way that meant he had decided he wanted to be dead already rather than wait to be told. Valsara's nostrils flared. Smoke did not follow. Breath did, rolling out in moist waves. The men coughed and wiped their faces and looked braver afterward. Jon stepped forward. He should not have, he thought. He did. The thing's head swung back down and hung above him. An iron bell the size of a cart held on a chain of thought. He felt the eye settle upon his skull. Vale's son, Valsara said, and the word was mercy carved out of stone. Old blood, old bone, wolf fire, be careful. Of what? He asked softly. Of wanting, said the dragon. And in the word was the smell of old kings with crowns that cut their brows to bone. Wanting is the mouth the other cold uses when it eats the warm. He did not say, I understand. He did not nod. He stood until the impulse to bow had passed. In the weeks that followed, Winterfell learned a new shape. Stables were extended. Cooks discovered that a stew hung near the spring would boil without flame if you had time and patience. Children, who sensed what adults could not, stopped throwing snowballs at one another in the yard nearest the godswood and began to slide along the wet stones, laughing when the steam hit their faces and then looked guilty for laughing. Priests of the new gods made sign after sign over their chests and then, in the kitchens at dawn, found themselves pressing their hands to the warm stones despite themselves, as a ham-handed man presses the cheek of the woman he swears he will leave. Stories came. Of course they did. Men who had been boys when all their gods had failed them invented another story in which they had never looked away. Women who had kept families alive through a winter of bruised knees and dried peas invented a story in which they were dragons' nurses and dragons preferred to eat the hands of men who wasted flour. Sansa gathered these and used them like she used spice, in pinches and careful handfuls, and when men came from the Rills and Serwyn and White Harbor to stand in the yard and spin their hats in their hands and say softly, "My lady, we heard," she had them ushered to the godswood and told nothing at all there, and then to the hall where she told them exactly enough. Jon slept less. His dreams filled with the slow coil and uncoil of a thing larger than a hall, with breath like hearths. He found himself walking at midnight along the walls, the snow whispering beneath his boots, while Valsara's shadow turned across the yard in patient arcs. Ghost kept pace with him, sometimes ranged ahead, sometimes stopped and stood with his fur lifting along his spine like grass flattening before a storm. One night the sky seemed open, the clouds parting as if the lid of a box had been pried. The moon swelled, scarred and indifferent. Far to the north, a line of light ran along the horizon, thin as the edge of a knife. Should not have been. The north did not produce such lights, not this far south, but men who had gone to sea had told of them, and children had dreamed of them. Sheets pulled over their heads to give the world a place to be born. The lights were green and then violet and then the pale, obscene yellow of old bruises. They moved like thought running through the brain of a sleeping god. Jon stood on the battlement over the gatehouse and watched until his eyes watered. He felt Valsara climb the wordless stairs of the black shaft without needing to look. The creature's head rose above the godswood fence, then higher and higher, until the eye could find the distant light and the body could fill with that tight, silent attention that was the only thing in it that was like prayer. He did not know if the other cold would come in months or years. He only knew the world had exhaled something that had been held too long. On the wall, the men muttered. One took off his glove and bit the heel of his hand and tasted salt and laughed out the taste because he was still alive. The old had not left. It had simply gone under. Beside him, Sansa appeared like a second thought he'd been meaning to have. She had wrapped her cloak well. Her hair's copper had become almost black in the green light. Bran wrote, she said, through the bird, through the bark. He wrote without ink. He said we were foolish. He said we were necessary. Jon said nothing. In his chest there was a weight shaped exactly like the face he would never see again as a boy. He let it sit. I will tell the lords of it in the morning, Sansa said. and remind them that foolishness and necessity have always been a married pair. They'll listen, he said. She touched her glove to his sleeve. She never took his arm. She understood he was made of two winters that would either rub together and catch or wear each other out. They will listen to the wolf, she said, and the dragon will teach them how. The lights changed and went away as if someone had put a thumb upon a wine stain and pressed until it disappeared. The dark was ordinary again. Thick, local, wet. Jon could feel Valsara's climb back down into the earth, the slow, unhurried assurance of it, as if something had tested the lock on the door and found it still friendly. They had work. Winter had arrived as a quiet stranger, and now it would squat and make itself a heavy guest, eating bread and patience and songs. Men would starve or be brave, often both. A beast slept under their feet that could put a city in the sky for an hour with its sigh. Somewhere else, a cold as sharp as wanting opened its small, perfect mouth. Jon went to bed. He fell asleep with his hand on Ghost's flank. He did not dream of dead men marching. He dreamed of a deep river of hot stone with a small boy standing on a bank, throwing pebbles in, laughing at the hissing as each stone vanished. In the morning, Valsara asked for meat. It did not roar. It did not demand. It came to the edge of the godswood where the fence had been removed and looked at the yard in that way it had, measuring not men but paths. Jon had prepared. He had seen to the slaughter himself, and to the words said over the carcass, and to the way the children watched from the gallery with their fingers wrapped around the wood so tight you would not unpeel them without a knife. He said the name. The heart tree stirred. They brought the carcass on chains, and Valsara did not tear at it like a beast. The dragon took it, and the taking was the opening of a door and the closing of it again. The smell spread. It was not foul. It was simply large. On the third day after, a boy who had waded into the stream as a joke came out with his feet blue to the ankles and his teeth chattering in a way that did not match the temperature of the water. On the fifth day, a hunter brought in a lark that had frozen mid-flight and fallen like a stone onto the path. Men began to wake with their breath too tight in their throats and their wives' hands on their necks to warm them. These were not omens, not really. They were ownerless. They were simply true. Jon took the men he trusted and rode a circle out from Winterfell's walls. He touched the snow at noon and it squeaked like a scream. He pushed his gloved fingers into the dirt at the frozen brook and brought up mud that steamed and then smoked and then turned hard. He lay his ear to the ground where the trees had bowed in one direction and tried to hear what Valsara might be listening to. He heard nothing beyond the slow politics of roots. When he came back, a message waited on the hall table that had no script, no wax, no stamp. It was a stick figure drawn in ash on the tabletop, as if a child had got out of bed and wanted to make mischief. The figure had 3 births marked, 1 slash at the chest, 1 at the head, 1 at the belly. Arya looked at it and said, "He's telling us where the cold will punch if it's polite. Heart, mind, hunger." "Bran," Jon said, and the word was a knife cleaned after use, set on the table point away from temptation. They built fires in the rooms where the children slept. They trained the men without saying they trained them. Sansa set up a table at the back of the hall with bowls of boiled oats and cups of strong tea and did not charge for them. The old women sat there and told stories they had kept in their mouths like seeds for a long, untrustworthy spring. Some were nonsense. Some had teeth. All had warmth. Valsara learned Winterfell's ways too. It learned that the yard made a circle and sometimes boys ran round and round it in the snow until they fell with the particular joy that belonged to only that age, and that if the creature moved its head at the just right moment, it could push a small, perfect wind that would set those boys laughing harder. It learned the smell of the smoke from the big kitchen when the dough stuck and the cooks shouted clever things at each other while their hands moved without looking. It learned Jon's step separate from other men's and came to the surface more often when that step entered the godswood. One evening, as dusk turned the world into a bruised apple, Jon stood under the heart tree and watched the steam rise from the pit like prayers. He did not call the dragon. He did not need to. He laid his palm against the bark and closed his eyes, and the world rose up in him in 3 pieces: the heart, the mind, the hunger. He had been born with all three. He had learned to suspect the heart where it was too soft, to respect the mind where it was too quick, to fear hunger where it wore another name and smiled. He was tired of fearing himself. He opened his eyes, and the snow had begun again, patient and intimate. It settled on the lashes of the carved face. It salted Jon's hair. He looked down into the pit's dark, which was not a dark now that he knew the thing that filled it was not emptiness but a body that trusted him enough to sleep deeper than a knife. "What is broken in me?" he said aloud. "Looks like you." The weirwood did not answer. Valsera did not either. Instead, from the south, there came the yapping of riders long before the first horn. The sound brought the winter birds out of the spruces in a single ragged push. Men on strange horses. Men with the wrong kind of song on their breath. Jon had thought trouble would walk from the north with no boots on. It came instead in a lathered gallop over the stone road, banners snapping like wet shirts in a mean dawn. Arya reached him at the heart tree with her face bright like frostbite and said, very politely, as if asking him if he would like more tea, "The Queen's men have arrived." Sansa joined them, her hands already occupied with something larger than fear. She did not say the name. She did not need to. Jon felt suddenly very old and very young. He thought of a throne made of eddles for men too proud to sit in a chair. He thought of bells that did not ring. He thought of how warmth makes its own arrogance. He had wanted to fight one thing. He had been given two. Valsera rose into the godswood behind him, a slow breaking of the earth's first idea. The creature's breath washed past his neck and froze the hair there in a delicate lace. "Be careful," Valsera said, and the word careful was made of 100 hungry winters without meat. "I will," he said, and perhaps he lied. Or perhaps this time, standing between the warm and the wanting, he told the truth. The wind ahead of the riders came first, a hot breath sent by hooves that had not learned the north's patience. Snow lifted in quick flurries along the road as if to hide the arrivals, then dropped away with a shrug. The gate guards pulled the bars as Jon crossed the yard. He did not hurry. Rushing was a language and he couldn't afford to speak it. They came under banners that did not know the sky. A black field fixed by a red, three-headed dragon, the paint stiff and new upon the silk, and beneath it a clutch of standards bearing spears bound with knots like clean scars. The men beneath those banners rode as if the wind owed them toll. There were northerners among them, too. Men who wore the tight mouths of those who had chosen a side they didn't want to speak aloud. At their head was a man whose face had been carved down by order and iron. His helm was plain. His cloak had no fur. He wore obedience like a second skin. Jon had seen soldiers who were blades and soldiers who were hands. This man was a lock. "Grey Worm," Arya murmured, no surprise in it. She had a way of hunting names as if they were rabbits that did not know they'd left tracks. Sansa stood to Jon's left in a cloak that had eaten 3 foxes and a bolt of heavy wool. She had braided her hair simply, no jewelry, no invitation to treat her as a court. Behind Jon, the yard was already becoming a story. Men who had been boys when the snows began trying to look like fathers, old men trying to look like mountains, children hanging from gallery rails with their mouths ajar. A coil of steam drifted lazily from the godswood fence like a thought someone kept forgetting to say. The riders slowed, reined, and fanned just enough to make a show of space. Grey Worm did not blink against the cold. The snow took him and melted, and took him again. He laid 2 fingers against his breast and touched the air. "The Queen's justice greets the king in the north." Jon kept his face. "Winterfell greets those who come under peace." A small man rode from inside the hedge of spears, bundled in furs that tried and failed to make him look like a northerner. His hair had gone more salt than brown since Jon last saw him, and the scar across his nose had sunk into the map of his face like an old river. He smiled, which on him was always only half a trick. Tyrion Lannister drew off his glove and held out a hand Jon did not take because it would insult both of them in different ways if he did. "Lord Snow," Tyrion said. "Or is it your grace now? I confess, I have never mastered the way titles grow like fungus. You've always been good with rot, Arya said brightly, too far away to be addressed, exactly close enough that she could be heard. Tyrion's eyes moved to her and warmed with a quick, private grief before the embers covered. Lady Arya, it's a comfort to find some things alive. He turned back to Jon. We bring words, not war. Her Grace asks audience. A hall will do. A god's wood be better. Sansa's mouth curved in something that wasn't a smile. Our god's wood is occupied. Tyrion's head cocked, little raven-like movement, taking and storing and not showing if he meant to spend what he'd taken. So we've heard. The songs run faster than horses in winter. May we come in before one of your honest snows eats my good eye. They did not leave the yard under escort like conquered men. They left it like guests, with every glance at them counted and stored, every whisper recorded by the corners of the hall and the breaths of the hearths. In the gallery, a girl dropped a wooden doll, and Grey Worm's head turned at the sound with the clean movement of a sword finding a new target. Tyrion's boots hit the flagstones with a civilized thump as he dismounted with care that had more in it than age. He stood for a long heartbeat with one hand on the saddle, catching the cadence of the place in his bones the way a musician finds a room's key by humming under his breath. In the hall, they warmed their hands without pretending they weren't happy to. Sansa took the high seat not as a queen. She had never liked crowns, but as a woman who knew chairs were also weapons. Jon stood beside her, which was the only place he could stand now if he wished to be believed by men who had already chosen to mistrust the empty space where a crown wasn't. Tyrion stopped at the foot of the dais and bowed as if the world were even and heirs were cheap here. Grey Worm didn't bow at all. He set his feet and became taller by doing nothing. The Queen sends me, Tyrion said, because I am still the best piece she can risk losing. She sends this man because he is the piece she will not lose. And what does she send in her mouth? Arya asked, leaning one shoulder to a post, playing at idleness with the precision of a cat deciding whether a bird's life will be improved by terror. Questions, Tyrion said. Demands. A confession of surprise. She did not expect the North to dig up one of her family's old bones and find it with a pulse. The dragon is not her family, Jon said. It is older than her line and older than yours. Tyrion's eyes flicked toward the Godswood door as if the heat from the springs had seeped under it into the hall and he could taste it on his tongue. Nevertheless, you have a dragon. She has a dragon. Men in the streets will say things even if intelligent men do not. She does not want to be at war with a song. Sansa watched him the way a woman watches a knife that has been cleaned very well. What does the Queen want to be at war with? Wanting, Tyrion said, and his glance at Jon was obedient to no one. We are poor at choosing our enemies. All the world teaches us to choose men and women. Very little of it reminds us that we should choose things. Grey Worm's voice came level and flat, the center of a field with no trees. Her Grace asks that the beast be shown to her. She asks that it be named in the sight of the old gods and the new, so there is no lie to call the men. She asks that the North remember its oath and kneel or not kneel, but speak the truth of what it means in daylight. You came without her, Sansa said. She sends justice without sight. Tyrion spread his hands a finger width, as if to lift a speck of dust he could not see. She knows the North. She knows what happens when a small woman rides into a room full of wolves. She is not small, Arya said, a sound between a laugh and a cough in her throat. And wolves do not fill rooms. They empty them. Jon said, You may see the Godswood. They did not make ceremony of it. Winter did not favor ceremony. Ceremony took time and hands that were better spent on wood and oats. The yard hushed when Tyrion and Grey Worm stepped into it again. Men edged back without letting their boots scrape. Snow flurried and paused to listen. The Godswood gate opened with a hiss where steam had made the hinges swell. The heat inside took northern men in the face like a slap. Southern men flinched too, but differently, as if warmth itself could be a threat when it came from the wrong part of the world. Valsera did not rise for them. The pit steamed. The heart tree shook a slow handful of leaves out of sheer habit. and the black edge of the disc showed its patient curve like a coin half spent. Jon did not call. He laid his hand to the bark until the scent of the sap filled his mouth like old wine, and then said the name because breath must dress bones. Valsera. The word went down. The stone answered with the careful turn of weight that had learned the steps. Grey Worm did not step back. He did not step forward. He became the kind of stillness that is a wall. Tyrion's eyes narrowed only because eyes must. Sansa's chin lifted one coin, neither smirk nor brace, only a purchase. Arya's mouth opened a hair and her fingers flexed against her thigh as if tightening a knot. The head rose and saw them and saw through them. It took in each face with a pleasure so distant from hunger it was nearly kin to boredom. When the eye found Tyrion, it paused. Something in the dwarf's stillness answered it without words, and for a breath the two things regarded each other as if remembering a joke their mothers had not liked. When the eye moved to Grey Worm, the pupil pinched small and thinner. Not threat. Evaluation. The dragon had watched men who marched under different songs and had learned some songs carried knives inside. Grey Worm did not look away. "We do not chain," he said in a tone that had the weight of a vow hammered too often. "We killed the men who chained us." Valsara's breath ran over him and set his cloak to a quiver. "No chain," the dragon said, and the words brushed the mind like fur cool from the snow. "No horn, no mother, no father, no lies about eggs." The last time it said eggs, the yard seemed to lean very slightly in the direction of the pit. A man's instinct to peer down a dark mouth that had just told him it wouldn't bite. Tyrion swallowed, throat working once, not from fear. He had stood too often in rooms that meant him harm for fear to be a fresh guest. But from the clean muscle work of a mind making room for a new shape. "We have a dragon too," he said softly. "Drogon. He flew west. We do not know if he returns. If he does, he is not a law. He is a fact. Facts are hard to eat." The humor in Valsara's tone had the dry warmth of coals. The eye turned to the heart tree, then down to Jon again. "Old blood, old bone. Be careful." This time, the careful laid a hand on the part of his brain that had learned to step into a storm and pretend it chose him. Grey Worm's gaze finally shifted, from eye to Jon. "Her Grace says the North must name its oaths. If you are under her, say it. If you are not, say it. The marches in the South make room for neither dream." "The South can keep its marches," Arya said. "We have roads." Tyrion lifted a hand as if to pluck that from the air and tuck it somewhere pleasant. "We came to hear a thing said. We came to say a thing heard. The Queen will not come north with fire. She will not send fire north with us. She seeks a treaty written with fewer knives than the last one. If you will hear me where bread is broken and not just where gods watch, I will tell you the shape of it." In the hall, bread was broken. The loaves were heavy and new, and the crusts cut the roof of the mouth in a way that reminded a man it had done something. The stews were thick with turnip and the shreds of last year's pigs. Men slurped and pretended they had not been made children by the act of sharing. Sansa let Tyrion speak not from the foot of the dais but from a bench at the first table, where lads with red ears and men with cracked knuckles could smell him and decide if he was a story or a person. "The Queen," Tyrion said, keeping his voice like honey that refused to pour too fast, "proposes peace by negligence. She will not ask for the North's fealty. She will not give the North her law. She asks only that you declare what you are and what you are not. If you are a kingdom, say it. If you are a ward, say it. If you are a wall against something you can't name because it doesn't wear a crown, say that too, and we will spend our gold on the sea instead of roads built for marching." "Why?" a man from the back called, rough as a scythe on stone. "Does the Queen who burned a city worry about roads?" Tyrion took the blow with a small nod that never touched apology. "Because the Queen who burned a city learned something only a madman would refuse to learn. Fire solves hunger briefly and creates a different hunger that is worse. We have not come to pretend that did not happen. We have come to promise it won't happen here." His eyes went to Jon again, and this time the grief in them was not for show. "We are not good at keeping our promises, but we are not done trying." Sansa broke a crust cleanly in her hands and set both halves down without eating. You ask us to name ourselves so that southern men can sleep easier. I ask because the sea hasn't learned to love laws, Tyrion said. And because there are men in Old Town who are very busy convincing themselves that dragons are taxes with wings. Make work for them somewhere else. Jon looked to Arya. She had taken her knife to a loaf and cut it into a pattern that meant nothing and would stick in his mind for hours. She raised an eyebrow, an answer as useful as any counsel's. He looked to the benches. Faces he knew and faces he had taught himself to recognize. Men who would die for a word if he said it with the right weight. Women who would not die for any man but would send their sons to do it if the flower held out and the story was fair. "We are the North," Jon said, and the words were not a title and not a plea. They were a piece of weather. We keep our word to those who keep theirs. The Queen says she will not burn us to make a point and will not come north with a crown that needs kneeling. If she keeps that word, we will keep ours. We will not raid her marches. We will not feed men who raid for her. We will not harbor those who come north to escape a law we don't want to understand. Grey Worm listened like a man eating staples. Not enjoying, not refusing, understanding their purpose. Her Grace asks to see the treaty written. She'll see it, Arya said. We'll even spill wine on it to make it look old. Sansa's gaze slid to Tyrion and held him where he was. And when the other cold comes? Tyrion's jaw worked. He was not good at saying I don't know. Then we will wish we had made more friends and fewer speeches. The treaty, when it was ink, was brief. Sansa dictated. Tyrion suggested. Gendry's hand made the letters with an old man's careful spite for error. Jon signed last. His name sat upon the page like something carved into frost with a knife. It would last for a while and then go away, and no one would remember exactly which hand had made it, but men would remember the winter. 3 days later, the riders were gone. The treaty rolled and waxed inside Tyrion's satchel. Grey Worm silent as the shadows in a room that had been emptied for sleep. In their wake, Winterfell felt larger, then smaller, the way a hall feels after a feast when the air is still full of grease and laughter, but there are only a few men left to keep the fire honest. Jon walked the battlements at dawn. The sky had the bruised apple look again, and the air made the hairs in his nose crisp. Below, the gods would breathe. Valsera had taken to rising at odd hours and standing with its head just above the fence. I half-lidded, not guarding, not patrolling, simply existing in a way that kept the yard true. Bran's raven came as the light decided what kind it meant to be. It dropped from the sky as if it had chosen the spot long ago. It landed on the crenel where the snow had drifted into the shape of a sleeping dog and turned once in a circle upon its own feet like a tired man before bed. Jon reached, and the bird allowed it with the indifference only trusted things can afford. The voice that came wasn't words. Not at first. It was a pressure like a thumb against the soft place at the base of the throat. Then the shapes of thought arranged themselves. Not west, the raven told him. North and under. The other cold is building a mouth. It has learned to chew slow. Jon let his hand rest upon the bird's back until the quiver of its small heart steadied. Where, he asked softly, is the tongue? Rivers, said the raven. Caves. Places where breath forgets which world to belong to. It does not march. It waits. It wants us to bring roads to it. Then, after a pause that contained decades, the horn sleeps in Old Town. The men there do not know what it calls. They mean to cut it to count the rings. Do not let them. Jon breathed out. His breath made ghosts that tried to rise and fell to the stone instead. We have a treaty, he said very gently. We will go south with letters before we go with steel. The raven's head cocked. Bones with ink are bones. He felt the corner of Bran's mind curl up in wicked amusement before smoothing again. Be careful. Of wanting, Jon finished. The bird's claws shifted on the stone. It launched without warning, slashing the air 3 times and was gone. He did not call a council. He did not wish to teach the world to think only in rooms full of chairs. He found Sansa in the yard speaking with a woman whose hands were red to the wrist with dye and who needed wood more than words. He told her, She listened and adjusted 3 plans in the space of a breath without saying their names. She could make a battle out of flour. She could make an army out of a market. "We send Arya," she said. "Not with a knife. With a name and a cloak and that expression she has when she means to tell the truth so carefully it becomes invisible." "Arya won't like the South," Jon said. "Arya likes to come home," Sansa said, and the softness in her voice was the kind that cut. "She'll like that more than she dislikes anything else." They called Arya with a whistle Jon had meant as a joke when they were children, and which still found her even in a fort full of men who liked to pretend they did not go soft at such things. She came with snow on her shoulder and a curl of steam at her ankles. She had been standing near the Godswood again, listening to Valsera breathe as if the cadence could be taught to a hand that needed it. "A horn," she said after Jon had finished. "Men in Old Town who think their books are locks. A mouth under the north that has learned to be patient. I'll need boots, the kind that don't admit to being southern." "You'll need a seal," Sansa said, and held up a bit of cut wax on a leather thong. "Father's wolf. It will be real where the others are just good at pretending." Arya looped it over her head and tucked it away. She did not smile. She had learned that a smile is a confession. "I'll go alone." "You won't," Jon said. "Gendry goes. He knows the Citadel steps even if he never climbed them." "The Maester," Arya lifted a brow. "Will he survive Southern wine?" "This one will," Sansa said. "He hates it so much he'll stay sober." Arya laughed. "Quick. And who will keep the dragon from eating the wrong lord while I'm gone?" "Ghost," Jon said, and Ghost, who had slunk behind them with the delicate dignity of a boat that knows it is too big for the slip, sneezed a fine mist and then set his jaw as if to confirm he had always intended to be given the job. They left at dusk, 2 figures that did not ask the road's permission. Gendry wore a plain cloak and a small pack that clicked once where glass met ink. Arya wore nothing that shone. Valsera watched them from the Godswood and said nothing aloud, and yet Jon heard the thought anyway, like pressure behind the teeth. "Be careful of doors that want to be opened." Arya lifted her hand as if to knock anyway and then dropped it. "We will." In the days that followed, the winter came closer to the skin. Bread rose less gladly. Water sullenly refused to leave pots unless asked in a better voice. The men of the outer farms began to pen their stock nearer the walls without being told. Stories walked faster. A boy said he had seen ice smoke rising from a cave near a river that had never frozen in his father's days. A woman swore she had put her hand on the stones of her hearth at midnight and felt a second heartbeat slow as mountains. Jon rode north and west, then south and east, a wheel with Winterfell at the hub. He was generous with his presence among men who had learned to need presence more than porridge. He stood in yards where the snow lay smooth as shaved wood and taught boys to set their feet as if the ground were an argument they could win. He spoke softly to old men who had stopped hearing anything but insults and told them that breathing was not defeat. He pressed his palm against stones that had forgotten warmth and coaxed them with the names of rivers. He came home tired to a hall that had learned to keep his seat empty for as long as it took and no longer. At night he sat in the Godswood with Valsara's eye above him like a slow star. He learned the dragon's moods, which were not moods as men knew them but tides. Long sadnesses that were not grief, long pleasures that were not joy, a kind of anger that was only the honest statement of a boundary. He learned the names for heat under the ground and the ways it moved like animals in a pen under the feet of stones. He learned that the breath of the earth changed taste before snow, before storm, before things with legs men could stab. He learned that the taste before the other cold was like the flavor of a coin held too long in the mouth. On the 10th day after Arya left, a raven came not from the sky but from the pit. It rose on a pillar of steam, panting as birds do when air is wrong for them. It settled on Jon's shoulder and bit his ear, not gently. He felt Bran's thought like a hand on the back of his neck pushing his head toward a door. Under, the raven threw at him the word a shiver in the skull. They are not marching. They are building a stair. Break it. How? Jon said simply, because he had learned to disdain loud questions. The hot river, the bird said. and his head filled with a map that was not lines on parchment but veins under skin. Open it. Make it run where their cold is teaching itself to sit. It will complain. Let it. Jon looked up at Valsara's eye. The pupil had narrowed until it was a thin stitch. You cannot burn it, the dragon said. You can move the warm until the cold is bored. Lyra, Jon said to the air, and the air, obedient and tired, delivered her within the hour, trailed by apprentices whose hair had learned to hold dust and whose faces had learned to hide awe. He took them to the old places where the springs had been half covered for kitchens or convenience. He showed them the shafts he had found as a boy and not understood, capped with old iron plates stamped with signs no one had kept the key for. He spoke Valsara's lesson, and Lyra listened with her forefinger between her teeth as if she meant to measure rock with it. "We can do it," she said finally, and her eyes did not leave the ground as she said it, because the ground didn't like to be lied to. "We open the lower runs. We teach the new water to remember the old bed. We cut a channel east of the last sheepfolds and we wall it. It will tear the frost out from under the caves if we ask it right." "It will flood?" Sansa asked, weighing lives against lives without any pretense that she could make the numbers add to anything but sorrow. Lyra nodded. "We can choose where. A mile from the Birchman's Bridge. The little farms there will have to come in. They'll hate it. They'll hate me. They'll stay alive to do it." "Do it," Jon said, because sometimes all the choosing in the world became ugly at the same point and you could not step around it. "Send men we trust to move the families. Send women we trust to move the bread." The digging began before dawn the next day. Men who had despised spades learned to love them. Boys who had preferred swords learned to admire picks. The ground was iron, and then it was animal, and then it was water. The first cut was slow. The second, faster. The third took the labor of old grudges and turned them into steam. When the warm water found the old bed again, it growled like a dog that had finally been told it could eat. It ran east, and the ground under the caves near the river shifted with a sound like knees standing after too long on stones. 3 nights later, a noise woke the birds in the spruces in one breath and set them down again in thin confusion. Men put their hands to the floorboards of their beds and felt a purr. Women standing by the bread troughs hissed through their teeth as the wood under their feet complained. The steam from the godswood rose clean and proud. Far to the northeast, under a seam in the land where the snow always lay oddly thin, something sighed that had never admitted to breathing. The next morning, the boy from the Birchman's Bridge came into the yard with a frog in his fist, grinning so wide you could have put a coin between his teeth and lost it. "They're back," he shouted, the words throwing their hats in the air. "Frogs!" He held the little beast up as if it were a lord. The frog hung there, bemused by the cold, alive enough to not notice it yet. "Not west," Bran had said. "North and under." Jon laid his hand against the weirwood and listened for the other cold, the way a man listens at a door before deciding which way to run. It had not gone, but it had shifted, upwards a hand's breadth, away a hand's breadth. Bored, as Valsara had said it would be, by a room that complained of heat in the wrong places. He slept that night without dreams. In the morning, Ghost was gone from the foot of the bed before the first bell, and when Jon rose and dressed and went into the yard, the direwolf was waiting at the godswood gate with steam freezing in a lace around his muzzle. Ghost whined through his teeth and turned his head just enough to show Jon the length of his neck. They went in together. Valsara was not at the rim. The pit steamed. The black disk sat on its collar with frost's edge begun again in the places Lyra's men had not patrolled with rags. The heart tree wore new white along its brows. Jon put his palm to the bark and closed his eyes and made his mouth into the shape of the name. The steps spoke. The weight rose. The eye that came was different, not narrowed with caution, not wide with hunger, focused. Jon felt it in his bones as a soldier feels a horn note that means running will not be clever enough. The other cold sent a tongue, Valsara said, and the word tongue had in it a smooth, wet sound that made every child on the far side of the fence frown without knowing why. It licked. It looked. It grew bored. It is going to look somewhere else unless someone gives it a reason to find this place interesting again. Be careful. Of wanting, Jon said. No, Valsera answered, and the idea landed in his chest like a thrown knot. Of cleverness. Cleverness is the mouth heat sometimes uses when it eats itself. Jon's laugh was short and bitter enough to make Ghost's ears twitch. We're full of that. He felt, more than saw, the dragon's attention turn to a point far south and slightly west. A place that tasted in his mind like old books and wax and polished stone. The Citadel. The Horn. A hall where men had convinced themselves that the world could be weighed out in a dish. He saw Arya in his mind's taste as a sharp sliver, cold and quick, slipping through a doorway that could not be seen unless you knew where to feel for it with the back of your hand. Bring her home, he whispered, not to Valsera and not to any god, to the air, to the practice of breathing. Bring them all home. He did not hear an answer. He did not need it. The god of the north had never been one to whisper comfort. It was a god of weather, which is to say a god that kept its promises and killed without rancor. By afternoon, a courier came loping in from the east with his boots frozen white to mid-calf and a grin cracked deep by wind. The river runs hot at horse knee, he gasped to anyone who would listen. Steam rose in the reeds and the fish floated belly up as if drunk, and the ice broke like glass and carried it all off, and the caves near the bend stank of iron and then stopped, just stopped, like a kettle pulled from the flame. He bent double and laughed until it sounded too much like crying and straightened and spat and said, "My mother will call me a liar. I don't care." Jon stood on the gatehouse and watched the light go blue. The treaty would be read in King's Landing by men who would not feel their toes while they debated how much ink a northern promise was worth. The horn would be handled by hands that did not understand how easily mouths are taught to speak wrong. A girl he loved would be threading her way among men who read for sport. A dragon would be teaching itself patience for the sake of men who could not learn it without a knife against their throats. He felt very tired and very awake and exactly himself. That night he slept with Ghost's weight at his feet and Valsara's breath in the stones beneath the bed. He dreamed he was walking under Winterfell with a lantern whose flame had learned his cadence. He came to a gallery where the walls were all black glass and no sweat showed on them at all. And at the end of the gallery there was not a door but a curtain of steam that thickened and thinned on its own curious schedule. He lifted his hand to part it and felt a hand on his wrist. He did not turn. He did not need to. The fingers were long and cool and had sap in them. "Be careful," said Bran's voice, and it was not in his head alone. It was in the bones of the walls and the breath of the water and in the tiny places in a man's heart where the blood turns and goes back. Be careful of winning. The other cold loves a victor better than a fool. Jon let go of the curtain. It did not know him. It did not miss him. He woke to the ordinary dark and the small, steady snore of a dog in the yard and the smell of porridge that had been poured in to pots and forgotten for the night. He lay there a long while, listening to Winterfell breathe. Dawn found him at the Godswood again because that was where he lived now when he was not pretending to live elsewhere. Snow came like powder blown from a millstone. The pit steamed. The heart tree watched the world make its bargains. Valsera rested with its jaw on the edge and its eye half shut, pretending to be asleep the way some wise men pretend not to have been listening. A horn sounded at the outer gate. Not alarm, not joy. Arrival. He turned, expecting a courier's wobble or a merchant's lie. What came under the arch surprised him first by how little it surprised him. A young man rode a shaggy horse and led a mule. The mule carried a chest wrapped in oilcloth. The young man's cloak had been mended by a hand that believed in patience and good needles. His hair was the color of wheat that has decided to stay for another season. His eyes were blue and cheerless and honest. "Sam," Jon said, and the name made his mouth sore with relief. Samwell Tarly slid from the saddle with the care of a man whose knees had been taught by books to be suspicious. He laughed, and the laugh had bacon and ink and fear and stubbornness in it. "You look tired," he said. "You look like Winterfell got bigger when you weren't watching." "It did," Jon said. They met like brothers who had chosen different religions and forgave each other their gods. Sam patted the mule's neck. I brought you something blasphemous. A horn. Sam blinked. No, gods no. A book. He grinned, crooked. The horn is not in Old Town. John's breath went out as if someone had pinched his nose and mouth closed at once. Where? Sam touched the oilcloth. In a place that doesn't know its own name anymore. In a tower that wasn't a tower when it started. In a ruin that isn't from your histories. He looked at the godswood and did not pretend not to see what was watching back. You have a dragon. Winterfell has a dragon, John said. Sam nodded. Then you have a chance. Because the horn calls everything that listens, and this one has learned to hear too much. He looked up, and his good, honest fear sat on his face like a sensible hat. If they blow it in the wrong place, the other cold won't have to march. It will find the warm by song. John closed his eyes. He saw Arya walking along a balustrade with her feet turned exactly so, and Tyrion arguing with men who believed gold could teach dragons not to be dragons, and Sansa laying out bread with one hand and law with the other, and Valsera sleeping because it could, because he asked and because the world was so tired it needed something big to pretend for a while. He opened his eyes. Show me the book, he said. Then we'll go get the horn before the wrong mouth learns to use it. Sam smiled, sudden. I knew you'd say we'd up. He tugged at the oilcloth. You won't like how it reads. It's older than any priest I've ever met and more honest. John touched the leather, warm from the mule's flank and the miles. Good, he said. I'm tired of pretty lies. Behind him, the heart tree shook its leaves and made a sound that might have been approval. Or it might have been the wind being ordinary again after a long season of trying to be something else. Valsara's eye opened a little wider. The pupil thinned like a needle. It was not hunger. It was focus. It looked north, then south, then down through the stones to where the hot river ran, and John felt it, as he had begun to feel everything that mattered. A pressure just behind the teeth, urging him not toward cleverness, not toward winning, but toward the plain hard business of keeping breath in chests and names in mouths and roads closed where mouths waited. He lifted the book. He felt its weight. He said nothing brave. He went to work,